Hello, everybody. Hello, Rasheed. Thank you again for joining. I think we're gonna pick off where we left it in part one.
Yeah, please. And for people, if you're just joining us now, so this is our series of Finding Yourself. And I guess, Vlad, what we looked at in part one, we were looking at the nature of life, and that we find ourselves here in this experience. We come and we go. We're taught all sorts of things about ourselves. We gather all sorts of things. The seasons come and they go. Sometimes there's a long winter, sometimes there's a short spring. We're taught language, all sorts of ideas and all sorts of things will happen. And it's a bit mysterious, and there are different views about how we find ourselves here, what will happen during this time, after this time, and so on. And there's all this mysterious stuff that's going on within the body, all that kind of stuff that, unless you've studied it, most of us have got no idea about, right? That's what we talked about, that life is a series of events and sensations that over a period of time, we tend to label as this, 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 this. In the seeing of that, for the adult, and this is leading us into mind, the adult might either feel a sense of, again, if you're watching this, listening to it, how do you feel? Either a sense of, oh, okay, I don't have to try and know all of this stuff or try and figure it all out. I feel a little bit lighter. Or what might happen is I'm a bit afraid because I'm not quite sure. I realize that I feel vulnerable, that what is going to happen next? What's going to happen in terms of myself, the body, when I die, my loved ones, or if I'm ill, or the challenges that we have, the problems that we find ourselves in life. It seems a bit overwhelming because if this happening is happening, I feel a little bit powerless. Either can happen, both can happen. And in a way, that's a lovely doorway to begin to talk about mind. Because the mind is that which is, if you like, the processor, the narrator. It does a number of different things. It processes, it calculates, it divides, it adds up, subtracts. So it does all these things, isn't it? It's trying to work things out all the time. The beautiful thing about the mind is that it's a beautiful thing that its job, it would seem, and again, it would be interesting for us to look at, and I'd invite everyone to look at these things. It would seem that its job is to plan, to prepare, to work things out, to store and thinking knowledge, bring knowledge back further forward like a good librarian for us, in order that we're able to move forward in our lives. So its job is to kind of, in that level, to plan, to prepare, and to keep us safe at best it can. The tricky thing with the mind is that the mind often is running all the time, and anyone who's watching this often knows that the mind is really noisy. Lots of people at the moment have got such busy lives. The mind is always stressing, or lots of people have lots of challenges now with what we call lots of levels of mental health based on their ideas, identity, and so on. So remember that in chapter one, if you like, in session one, when we looked at the nature of life, we find ourselves here, isn't it, in this body, and then in this shell, and we haven't picked the body, the gender, the this, the this, the this. And again, I invite everybody to, you might want to close your eyes and do this, or just be considerate and so on. If you can take yourself as far back as you can, as young as you can, you'll notice, maybe two, maybe one, some people even have thoughts earlier, there isn't that much thoughts going on. Maybe there's glimpses of this greenery, sky, what then you learn later on is the house. Do you know what I mean? So what we realize here, Vlad, is that when we first arrive, after a little bit of time, memory starts to come in, isn't it? Memory, and they say that first of all, when a baby's born, it's a bit disorientating in vision, and then this stuff is happening. But it takes a while before language is taught to us, or processing, or ideas are matched to that imagery. So here's the thing. Over a period of time, I remember that I think that my earliest memory was in me. I think because I don't know for sure what the order was, because don't have that sequential sense of time that I had more as an adult. But I think my earliest memory was staring out of a pram, kid's pram, so I could see what I later learned was sky and things. So when I first remember this, I'm saying I was in the pram, sky, and so on. But I didn't know at that point that's a pram. I didn't know the word pram at that age. I don't know sky and whatever. Do you see? So as we grow, language is taught to us, labels is taught to us. You're a girl, you're a boy, you're smart, you're intelligent, you're fat, you're thin, you're this, you're that, black, you're white, you're mixed, you're that. This is how the world came about. This is how. That's what babies say. Well, why? Mummy, daddy, why? How is that? Why is the sky blue? Who made us? Where does babies come from? Did it come from mummy? So all of these questions, right? And we're taught all this stuff. So we're taught all of this stuff. So we're absorbing lots of, I guess, there's lots of experiencing of the sensations that are happening in the body. And then we're taught lots of labels and names and language and subjects and history and so on, which we then later on spout. And all of these things we either accept or we reject. Then we get to a certain point where we think that we know everything about everything in the world, and we think that we know all of these ideas and all of that stuff. Well, we didn't pick the language, we didn't pick the thingy, we didn't pick where we were born, we didn't pick all of this stuff. We're either force-fed it, aren't we, or we take it on. It's a combination of, so that's the human experience. We're fed, in the same way that we're first of all fed physically because we can't eat, we're first of all fed information. So I say that it's important for us to be aware of that. The other thing that's useful on this journey for somebody who's finding themselves is that, so we're taught all sorts of knowledge about the world out there. We're taught some knowledge about the physiological body, right? Isn't it? And this connects to this, and there's the heart, and the this, and the that, and the that. But we're not taught much about this inner intelligence. We get far more interested in the mind's intelligence, ideas, concepts, but what about this mysterious stuff? What is it that makes you blink, makes me blink? What is it that makes me move this? What is it that beats? How does the heart beat this? I don't know. It's a mystery. So there's so much stuff that's going on. The most fundamental things that we find ourselves breathing, Vlad, the heart beating, that we've got nothing to do with, nothing. My conscious mind, as I see it, has nothing to do with all of that stuff. So this is interesting. I tell you why it's interesting. Because you might be, and anyone who's watching this at home, at this point, the mind might be a little bit quiet or intrigued. Most of the time we spend our mind in the concepts, this, my partner, or my lack of my partner, or my house, or the lack of a house, or how much money, or this and this, the economy, the president, the prime minister, this, da, 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 da. But this whole mysterious thing of life, after the bit when we've been kids, we stop wondering about that, but we start spouting that we know all the answers to it, but we don't know anything. What do we really know about this mystery? I say it to make us more appreciative of this whole experience, and to realize that the mind isn't as beautiful as it's incredible it is. As much we will learn all sorts of topics that will be useful to make me a good coach, a good trainer, a great mathematician, a good teacher, and so on and so on. It doesn't teach me that much stuff about the movement of mind, or why I seem to be so trapped in my thoughts about myself. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm this, I'm that, this is this idea is better than this. All of these things that we fight about. My own self-image, my own relationships to other people and how they are, my own ideas about different people from a different background, a different color, different class, different gender, and all of this nonsense that people find. So this mind thing that adds and subtracts, the most dangerous thing is it divides. Can work things out, it's great, but it adds and it subtracts, fine. But it divides. And sometimes it goes on this crazy multiplication thing. You know, when a calculator sometimes, it's like that. So we need to, what we're doing here is just become aware of the nature of the mind, that after a period of time we've been taught all of these things, and therefore we see life through that lens. We're seeing everybody. That's what a simple example is that. Good example, the weather. Oh, it's raining today, it's summer, it should be this. So we're constantly caught up in past or future. oh, today it's this, yesterday it was 24 degrees, today it's now, and we're constantly projecting, oh, it should be this, or my job should be this, or my boss is going to be this, or tomorrow it's going to be the food didn't taste as nice as it did yesterday. We're constantly becoming what I would call historians or fortune tellers. Historians about the past, this happened in the past and this happened, which is interesting because a lot of the stuff we're going on about our own personal past, I'm just setting this out, Vlad, and then it'd be good for us to have a conversation about these things. Lots of things in our own personal past, we weren't there. Lots of things that people wrestle with in the mind, this relationship, that happened with the parents and thingy, or the parent being there or absent, we weren't there. Is somebody, I have to say this, Vlad, I may have said it to you, is somebody's life story the truth? So let's bring the mind here and then our lives, because we often have all these judgments about our life, other people's lives, families' lives, what's going on. Is your life story the truth? The chronological events likely to be true. You grew up here, this, that happened, that happened, that happened. Is it the whole truth? No, you weren't there to know what happened when your parents conceived you, or when this happened, or then that happened, or then when that happened, when your sister did this, or what happened to your partner before. Who knows? I wasn't in every single room, but the mind would try and project a story of this. You know those times when somebody's not called you and our mind races, why haven't they called you? And then you find out there was something going on in their own life that had nothing to do with my own projections of what's going on. So we become historians about what happened in the past, fortune tellers, oh, this is never going to happen. We're never going to get another government, blah, blah, blah. All the world leaders like this. We're projecting. In coaching terms, they say that we distort, we generalize, we delete, and so on, all that stuff, that the mind does that, the mind does all that, to try and work things out and to keep us safe and to try and make order of things that sometimes seem to have order, sometimes that they don't. So mind is a magical thing, but it's based on the information that it tends to calculate based on the information it's already got, and then it tends to be, spouting out all sorts of other stuff. So what I'm saying here is that the mind is beautiful, but there are limits to how it's going to help you. If it is fulfillment and inner peace that you're wanting, because we're usually also taught that you will be perfect when, or your life will be better when you have this body shape, when you have this partner, when you have this amount of money. So that, remember, that's the lens that people are looking at everything from. When the weather constantly looks like this. And so it goes on and on, the mind. So again, going back to that thing, success is something we're spending a whole, conditioned success, because we're conditioned what success would look like. Something we spend a whole life looking for was fulfillment. Being at peace with myself and with life itself, which we looked at chapter 1, we were overlooking. So that's the nature of the mind. That's the nature of the mind, isn't it? The mind is like an engine that's on overdrive. And what I'm pointing out here, the engine is often, it's like a car where the engine's running even when you're in the house, even when there's other stuff. So that's just the setting up of the mind. So forgive me for that little, just presenting what mind does there, just for us to look at. And again, I invite anyone who's listening to see, does it chime with you? If not, throw it out. You might think this guy's talking complete rubbish. That's not true. It's all nonsense. Great. Vlad.
Yeah, where to begin? So I see a structure. I see the nature of life, which you presented beautifully in the first part, and then there is the mind, and they have a relationship. The mind has, ideally, I would say, the role of observer of the nature of life, of this flow of events, this flow of sensations, and so on. And I feel there is at least 1/3 element to this duality. I see society, which is most likely a product of the mind.
Collective mind, yes, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. And once society is constructed, it also enters a relationship with the mind, and it enters a relationship with life and with the nature of life. And when the mind has the relationship with these two entities, the nature of life and society, the mind, because it understands society, because it has created it to a degree, the mind looks towards society and starts to become an observer of society rather than an observer of life. And that's where I would say some of the things start to go well, I don't know if wrong, but some things, maybe some confusion arises. Let's put it that way. Well, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's quite a beautiful way to look at it, isn't it? Because, okay, what I've described a little bit is about how my own localized mind is constructed from my own background, my own circumstances and what's happened. And then what's useful for us to be aware of is then, of course, prior to that, my parents or all the people involved in my own life, their minds are all constructed by the people who have been around them. And then there's that, as you say, there's that collective societal in a small cluster and a bigger cluster thing. So there might be the societal of the family set up, the societal, the broader, you know, the country and the political, economic thing that one's set up into, and so on. And that's why you find how people are conditioned differently depending where they live and what construct that they live in different parts of the world, different, all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, so you're right. And then there can be, then that, you get what would be quite dense mind, what I would describe. So, because then that is then, what would seem to happen is then that becomes, the society's things become life. I like the thing that you said, maybe the best role is where the mind is first of all the observer of life rather than to jump in to be the judge or the analyst of life, to observe it. And so I think you're right, that collective mind that is understandably trying to, I would imagine that, you know, I'd imagine that from in those early days when societies begin to imagine and begin to emerge, and you've got people coming together and to work together because they realize in order to, I guess, survive and to get the best out of their environment, by putting certain things in place, relationships, families, groups, herds, this, that, they're able to best experience and exploit for good and what we call good and bad nature. So often then would seem, perhaps, then there's a battle that's going on here that then mind kind of is trying to, because we're wanting certainty. The mind loves certainty. The mind is wanting certainty and security. It would seem that the mind is wanting certainty and security. So individually and collectively. So we create this and we create that, we create that. So for the purpose of this, I don't want to go too much into the societal, because otherwise what can happen is that I will then be projecting and spinning ideas onto that. But you're absolutely right. That there's then my individual mind, there's the collective mind, the mind influenced by all the different people have influenced my own particular mind, how mind dances off of other people's minds. And then we've got the societal, how the societal mind awareness set up and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's interesting because what's interesting in here is also, we've got an element of, what's interesting in a way, aside from the mind purely of itself, you've got character, haven't you? You've got personality, and you've got this something that would seem in there, which is, I guess, the life connection. There's, let's call it the spirit, or that there's something, isn't it? There's something, it's not just mind. There isn't, remember that there's this intelligence that prior to our mind being developed in the individual. So for example, let me not make it so abstract, but if you're watching this or listening to this, people often say, or people's parents will often say, that the personality was there from very early on. The person was precocious or more shy. Some of the skills and the qualities, the person was very, very, very athletic, or the person who's quizzical and so on. So you've got all of that going on. So there is something of this self before, between and beyond the mind that's also there, and the mind is part of this stuff. But I think for so again, what we're wanting to do here is just be aware that this is all part of the dance of stuff. And what you point to us powerfully, Vlad, is this conflict that then can seem to emerge between myself and the ideas that I'm holding, the society I find myself, small scale, my life, my family, my workplace, or and the world more broadly. And then we've got all of this stuff that's going on. And then the ideas that we hold about other collectives and other mini societies of people who look differently for us or think differently for us and all of that kind of stuff. There are many people who throughout life and history who've pointed us, be it the Gandhis, you know, be the change you want to see in the world, and all sorts of other people saying that really if one's interested in this journey, it's really important to first of all start off with oneself. Because the mind often will jump in here and say, well, what about this person? Oh, it's because of this or then that, or but the economy, there's no point in me. On this journey, it would seem it's best for me to start with me understanding my own self and my own journey. The mind's likely to go to a big jump. What about this? Oh, but my parents never did that. But whatever of that, how are you going to stop that? But, you know, all sorts of ideas of things that we might genuinely be wanting to understand. So the thing here that's really interesting, Vlad, is I would say that what we're wanting to begin here to do is understand the human condition. And you might remember in session 1, I touched on it today. It's actually Mandela Day, remains Mandela Day. And Nelson Mandela is an interesting example of somebody, it's a good example, because he grew up certain circumstances as a black African in South Africa, with one experience during apartheid and so on, his background, and there'll be others with different backgrounds, different experience. And so, you know, he became a freedom fighter, part of the African National Congress to achieve freedom and so on. And so he quite rightly, from that lens, is fighting for equality through that lens. He goes into prison, put into prison. And what's interesting that I think he goes on a journey where he's wanting to understand the entire human condition, not just that person like him, or the black African, the white African, the mixed African, the person who's given this idea, this. So he's able to understand the entire human condition. What is it that makes my conditioning, my mind, this mind, that mind? What is it going on in our conditioning that makes us separate from each other? What is it that's going on? So the invitation here is to understand the human conditioning, the human mind. What is it that makes up our own mind and this collective mind that divides, subtracts, and so on, and that becomes fearful along these levels? That's where it becomes useful to understand and therefore become sympathetic to the mind, to the divides that emerge, rather than just trying to fight. Do you see? So this is where the heart begins to emerge. The heart begins to emerge because it becomes sympathetic to how mind has divided me from myself, me from all these other people, and then me from this. Do you see? So this is where it becomes interesting for us to become, what we want to do is to become sympathetic to the mind and how mind does divide and subtract. Over to you.
You know how there is a chance if you create something that you might overvalue it, let's say, you might fall in love with it and therefore see perhaps no flaws, but only the good. You even exaggerate some of the good parts that you see in your creation. I look at that, I take that and I look at this idea that I started with the mind and the society being a creation of the mind. If the mind looks at the society and sees, oh, that's my baby, there it is, and it's beautiful and it's perfect. And it's so beautiful and so perfect that it just looks towards it rather than towards the nature of life, which is perhaps the primary relationship and focus for the mind. I feel that that's where, you know, some of the things that you mentioned start to emerge, right? You call it dividing, for example, dividing oneself from this nature of life, seeing the self as separate, and therefore, if oneself is separate, then the others must also be separate from the self, because the self is no more life, so they are also no more life. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the focus, in my opinion, has to come back to the nature of life. The mind has to focus on the nature of life. It cannot focus on how beautiful and perfect society is or could be.
Or isn't.
Well,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's why I mentioned could be.
Yeah.
It should focus on what its kind of goal is, which is the nature of life.
Yeah, but you see, you also present the beautiful dilemma with the mind, that the mind, how mind then would seem to develop is then it's my mind, my thoughts, my ideas, my identity. So I become, and my ego, it becomes clustered around my own idea. And then I'm wanting to be safe, certain, and therefore there is this divide that kind of happens because I'm wanting to keep me safe, my family safe, da 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 da. So the mind, you know, the mind is a brilliant divider. That's the calculation it kind of does a bit too well.
but it does that calculation, I would say, only when it stops looking at the nature of life, because the nature of life can never kind of provide that kind of input for the mind to be able to apply division on, right?
Yeah. You're right. The challenge for us here is that what happens is that it all becomes like, it's interesting, we're using maths analogies. Everything in life becomes mathematics, working things out, calculating things, dividing things, adding,
measuring.
And so the mind is seeing everything through that maths, that everything's a problem to be, you know, maths is basically about problems, isn't it? You know, so, you know, so the mind has that nature. It tends to be problematizing. It's one of the reasons perhaps why when we're then talking, when in many traditions, be it silent prayer, be it meditation and so on, the things that will quieten the mind, people going for walks in nature, those are the times when the mind isn't active, because otherwise everything else is mind looking through mind, because mind is being so conditioned through language, through identity and so on. Most of the time when we're looking, we are looking through mind. There's very, very few times where it's not mind. I love the saying, never mind. I love the saying, never mind, because people say, oh, never mind this. But I wonder if people really knew or looked at that fresh, never mind. What would be possible if I wasn't looking through mind? You're setting up beautifully chapter 3, heart. So if everything wasn't through my mind, my ideas, my this, my life, this has to be that, that's not working, I've got to improve this, I've got to figure this out, what if, da 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 da. So the mind tends to be calculating, trying to work things out. The times when the mind is still, sleep, when we're deeply caught up in an exercise, whatever it might well be, those moments where there's no mind, often there'll be such a blissful state. And this is why when people do meditation, you know, it's so different when you're not in mind to when you're in mind. So I want listeners and viewers to reflect on the times when your mind hasn't been there, the times when you've just been so caught up in that family experience, the birth of the sibling or what have you, or the times when you're just so caught up, and other times when you're just caught up and you're going for the most beautiful walk, or you're staring at the sea and you're just at one with it. The things that we're just lost in it. We're not judging it. We're not labeling it. We're just at one with the experience. Is so different to them when we are narrating the experience, judging the experience, trying to improve the experience. So it's very interesting to notice when the mind, those times when the mind is still and is very, very peaceful. Sometimes there are those times when something will, you know, a bit of inspiration will suddenly come in. So the good thing I would say here for the mind is to be aware of. Notice those times in life where you still are open enough or not so noisy that a brilliant piece of inspiration just suddenly came in. We think that the mind is sovereign. We think it is the ruler of the show and it's before life. And then we think that the mind is the best or the only tool to figure things out, or that it can figure everything out. So that's what I just want for us to be mindful of, because there's a reason why in so many traditions, the silent prayer, or the chants, the mantras, or when we naturally, we know nothing about these things. The mind's noisy, Vlad, and we realize I need to just go and sleep, or I just need to go for a walk. Why is that? And then here's the thing, Vlad, 10 minutes before I go for a walk, I'm so angry at this person, or I'm carrying such a big, heavy problem or dilemma. I've then been walking for 20 minutes. I'm uninterested in it. Or Friday night, at the end of the thing, you've been so caught up in something, then you're uninterested in the work problem. What is that about? Suddenly these things that were problematizing this or that, my job, my this or that, we're uninterested. We just want to relax. What's that about? The mindful silence. I'm interested here in the never mind. Let's explore next time. Let's explore the heart. Is there another way? Because what we do know is in the mind, that mind stuff, there's so much pain, isn't there? And I'm not negating the real life challenges, the inequalities, the pain, the painful experiences that we find in life. People may have had all sorts of abuse, challenges, this, that, work, personal, we know it. Is there another way? Again, the Mandela example. Is there another way that we can help move beyond the mind? Is there another way in which we can show up? Is there another way of meeting life, as your point is to? Is there another way? That's what I want us to explore here. That's what I want us to see, if there's another way. The way of the heart.
We're coming close to the end of the second session. I think, Rasheed, maybe can you in a few minutes give us a tool, give us a direction in terms of how can we use the mind positively and keep it at that.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you asked that. Maybe a couple of things. First thing is for it to be quiet. The reason why we want it to quieten is it might be just working too hard, you might be tired, you might be exhausted, and you're wanting to have that clear mind. So just a few simple things. First of all, make sure you get the sleep you need. Allow yourself to sleep and rest. Begin to become aware of your own rhythms, your own body's knowledge, the times when the body does need to rest, when it does need to sleep. That's really important. Give yourself time out and so on. Ask yourself, do I really need to have how interested am I in the stories that my mind is telling me? How interested am I? Ask yourself gently, who am I? Ask yourself gently, what do I know for sure directly for myself? This will begin to quieten the mind. And then I invite us to just embrace oneself and to realize that the other thing that might help is realizing that most people act out of the conditioning of their mind. And so even those people who may have been really cruel to you or what have you are probably acting from that particular space. So I think if we can invite some compassion and to realize that people are at where they're at, but don't be too interested. Again, it's that thing, is your life story the truth? It's the chronological events, is the whole truth? We're beginning to see that I don't know all of that stuff. Is it nothing but the truth? No, there's all sorts of things that beyond. And just being a bit less interested in the stories of the mind, and perhaps spending that time in, perhaps if you're interested in meditation, time in nature, whatever it is that quietens the mind, or clearing up, washing the plates, anything that will quieten the mind. And to just be in that place of an appreciation for the mind and the appreciation for who you are, wherever you are at, prior to the judgments of I need to be better, recognizing that you're already whole in who it is that you are already. That would be my invitation. We will then next time begin to look at the nature of the heart, the path of the heart. But then we will, in the last one, we look at that, you're following your own unique path. Because you might be thinking, yeah, but there are challenges in the world. How can I do this? How can I? We'll then look at that. How is it that we can show up and perhaps change the vibration? Certainly, at least in our world, if not the world, in our world.
All right. Thank you very much, Rasheed. I think, as you, I love the fact that you started with getting rest. I remember reading recently an article saying the world is sleep deprived. We forget that what we need, that life comes first, and part of life is this mystery of sleep, of us needing sleep, for example. And yeah, we forget, we tend to override it.
And it's such a good example, because that's an example of when we fall back into oneness with life, because we're not conscious at the moment. That's such a beautiful example of when the mind's not on in that normal way, apart from when we're overly wired, and then when we fall back into life. So that's a really good practical example of what we're talking about. Then next time we'll talk about the heart, and the heart stuff will also nourish for this place of helping the mind and helping us begin to discover who am I, finding self. So I look forward to that next time.
Yeah, same here, Rasheed. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for taking the time to listen to us. We really want to hear about what you think. So let us know in the comments. Please tell us how you look at the mind, how you look at life.
I'm even more interested. Can I just say one last thing, if we've got time?
Sure.
I'm so glad you said it. Care about people, yes. Care about how people feel, sure. Care about what people think, beware. I have no interest in what anybody thinks. Do you see? For the very reason of what we've talked about, no interest in what somebody thinks, because their thought is conditioned thought. Care about people, so care, this is wonderful you brought this up there. Care about people, love oneself, love everybody else, love that heart. Care about how people feel and their experience, yes. What they think is what you think that they think and what they've been conditioned to think. Have no interest. I'm so glad we've said this. Be less interested in your thoughts. Be less interested in your thoughts. Be less interested in your thoughts. That in itself might be an interesting meditation. People might have things like, be less interested in your thoughts. I'm not, and this is the invitation of the heart. So we'll go deeper into this, and we can then look at, why is this heartful way? How will it add to life? Because it might seem like I have a saying, last saying, your thoughts, your thoughts are more of a prison than your reality. Mandela's a good example of this again. You might think that's impossible, but our thoughts, because if I believe that, then I'm trapped. There's no way out. I'm trapped in my thoughts as well as my reality. But if I can be at a place where I can be at peace, a quieter mind, which is the invitation of this whole series, and the heart stuff will help us to move there, Vlad, then we might be able to move beyond that thing. Because again, I think social media is full of what people think or what you think. How has it served us? There's been no raising of our bright vibration of our consciousness or our compassion. That's the journey that we're on here. And that's the invitation. So it's a beautiful place to invite the mind to a place of higher evolution, where it's useful, yes, but where it doesn't become just purely about divide.
There you have it, folks. Tell us about how you feel. Tell us about your stories, not so much about what you think. And yeah, we will hear each other next time.
Thank you so much, Vlad. A real pleasure.
Thank you, Rasheed. Bye, everyone.